Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. My name is Preacher Moss. I'm the host of the SOS, the Shout Out Show. Hope that you are having an amazing Wednesday. I'm glad everybody was able to tune in. I hope you've been watching some of the recent sports events. Of note would be, of course, the NBA champions, the new NBA champions for 2021, the Milwaukee Bucks. I want to give a shout out to the Milwaukee Bucks, the city of Milwaukee, and the Northside people who've been Bucks fans for a lot of years. Everyone in the city knows that it's been a 50-year drought before since they had a championship going back to 1971 with Lou Alcindor and, of course, the big O, Oscar Robinson. Today, we're going to take a look at some aspects of sports in society. Sports as change agents or sports as distractions. I think it's really, really important to begin to look at where we are in the context of history and the pandemic and things like that, and really, really begin to assess from a historical perspective the importance and the power of sports. Now, a lot of folks, we have the NFL and we have hockey and we have baseball and we have all of those. But I thought it'd be interesting to take it all the way back to some of the beginning stages of sports, particularly with people who are fighting for justice. Sports has been an important tool for fighting for justice. When I talk about baseball, of course, I talk about Negro League baseballs behind me. I'll be talking about the Negro Leagues. I'll also be talking about some of the aspects of people who broke into sports. But I also will go to the other side and ask vital questions, if you don't mind. Why is sports able to bring people together so much more so than the people who are major decision makers who can't come together on anything? Right now, we stand on the cusp of the Tokyo Olympics, sending athletes around the world, and instinctively, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world, the Olympics usually finds a way to pull people together, to have countries root for the athletes and cheer them on to victory in hopes of medaling a gold medal, a silver medal, or bronze medal, or just participation, putting up the good fight. So today I want to look at some of those aspects. And again, I also want to break down some of the aspects of sports that have not been so kind, if you will, to minorities, kind to oppressed people. Some of the sports have been, like I said, a bit, I want to say elitist, but they've excluded people. And in that space, the idea of being able to get into the sports has had a high barrier of entry, and as a result, a lot of people aren't able to participate in those sports. I myself, child of the 60s, we played every sports. We played every sport we could. We played seasonal sports in the neighborhood, and then we played spring and fall sports at school. Whether it was soccer, basketball, football, tennis, lacrosse, in the spring, cross country, track and field, tennis. We did it all. But what I didn't understand was in those days, particularly in the high school days, man, we didn't have a thorough connection to history. When I talk about baseball and Negro League baseball, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I had two major scenarios that connected me to this thing. When I say connected me to it, made me want to go investigate further. The first was my father, who had a friend who played for, back then, what was the Washington Senators. This is before the Washington Nationals. They had a team called the Washington Senators. And I think they played at Griffith Stadium. My father had a friend, his name was Fred Valentine. And Fred Valentine was like the last of the Negro League players to actually swing that bat. And he used to always talk about Mr. Valentine with a certain reverence, but also with a certain understanding that he held a particular place in history that had connected us all the way back. For those of us that never met Mr. Valentine, I didn't, but I was introduced to him through my father. The other thing about sports, brothers and sisters, I'm also going to bring up one of my favorite films. One of my favorite films is a sports film. It's called Bingo Long and the Traveling All-Stars. And that story is about Negro League baseball players. Now, parts of it fictionalized. Of course, it had some great actors in it. Billy D. Williams, Richard Pryor, James L. Jones, Stan Shaw. You had all these characters, and they were funny. However, with the laughs and everything, they pointed out the fact that this was based on a true scenario. And I want to take a couple minutes, if you guys don't mind, to just go through that. So like I said, I'm going to show you guys something. We're going to get rolling. But when we come back, I really want you to understand, and I want us to also appreciate the value of sports in our lives. I mean, it breaks up the monotony for some, so for a lot of us, and sometimes it's good to root for the home team. It's good to celebrate that tribalism, if you will. It's good to yell and scream about your neighborhood, your state, your city in comparison to someone else, and not have some toxic reaction. To be able to yell and scream and boo and all of that, and nobody loses life, nobody loses property. At the end, everybody goes home whole, except for the losing team. But then again, it's not a physical loss, it's just spiritual loss. So let's go ahead and get the show started. I'm Preacher Moss, SOS, talking about the power of sports in society. Let's roll.
A miracle finish would have to obviously happen for Phoenix to pull it out. And again, they're out of timeouts.
That's why you've got to concentrate on the details.
Booker turns, shoots, fires. Shot won't go. Tucker the rebound. And that'll do it. It's over. The Bucks have done it. The long wait has ended. After a half century, the Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions once again.
I just kind of want to give you guys a little taste of what they used to say on ABC Sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. Let's welcome some people to the show. First of all, if you're coming to the show for the first time, God bless you. Hope you're going to have a good time. Hope we can entertain you and we can earn, if you will, your trust and your respect and your time and your attention for our show. What you may want to do is click the notification button, the like button, the subscription button, all those buttons if you want to tick. Click them all. Or don't click any of them at all. Brothers and sisters, you are welcome to a very open platform that we call affectionately the ShOUT Show. Now, one of the things about the ShOUT Show, we encourage people to get into the comment section and express yourself. We are a communication forum, if you will. And the people that we have that I'm going to introduce you to, better known as the stars in the building, they are the people that literally make the ShOUT Show what it is. So we're going to take some time and introduce those folks. If you're out there, like I said, you can jump into the comment section. Don't be shy. Don't be a wallflower. You are welcome. Well, I always say that I'm the host of the ShOUT Show. I'm not the owner of the platform, because if I were the owner of the platform, you would clearly just hear ideas that are mine, and I would not be inviting ideas. So without further ado, let me get my stars in the building up. You know, I'm gonna and shout out to all the Milwaukee folks. And I'm going to tell you why it's a very important win for Milwaukee, but it's also going to make the point about the power of sports in society. So first off, I'm going to give a shout out to our craft services director, our chief dietitian, Sister Ree. How you doing, Sister Ree? Thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate you as always. God bless, and I hope that you and your family are doing well. Next up, we got Mr. 6 o'clock, straight up, straight down, my main man, Altaf Rasheed. What's going on, brother? I know you can appreciate the celebration of the Milwaukee Bucks winning last last night because 2 years ago we celebrated Toronto winning the NBA championship ahead of the Golden State Warriors. And I'm here to tell you, I know Toronto showed out. And it was interesting because that was the first NBA championship ever for Toronto, for the country, not the city, for the country. That's the way I looked at it. And it was interesting how they embraced basketball over a period of years. I mean, they had two teams. They had the Vancouver Grizzlies, they had the Toronto Raptors, and eventually the Grizzlies, Vancouver moved to Memphis. But the squad in Toronto was interesting because they stayed and they grew and they won a championship. And I was generally happy for not only the players, but the city of Toronto and also the country of Canada. Stick around. Walaikum assalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, brother. Thank you so much for coming on. And we have Sister Sultana, who is our consultant producer. I know Sister Sultana probably wishes that the New Jersey Nets were still in New Jersey, but I'm sorry, they're in Brooklyn now. They're the Brooklyn Nets. But it's even to say that the New Jersey Nets, when they played, I remember their players. They had Albert King, they had Buck Williams, they had Michael Ray Richardson. They had some really dynamic players that were entertaining, brothers and sisters. Even when they were New Jersey Nets, they had Kerry Kittles, they had Dikembe Mutombo. I mean, they had a bunch of players who could play that ball. They just didn't win a championship. They did go to the championship, but they didn't win it because Shaq was just too much for Dikembe. All right. So let's talk about sports. I remember two things about sports. One was the idea that sports could pull everybody together. That was one idea. And then there was this thing about who owned the team. The idea that sports, as much as we want to celebrate it as this free art form, it's still a business. Amateur sports are different. When you play in high school and you play in college, it's a different thing. It's amateur sports, meaning that you really want to play this game. There's no benefit for you. In college, you may or may not get a scholarship. In high school, you may or may not get a scholarship. In middle school and elementary school, you're playing for the love of the game. You're playing to increase your skill. And at some point in time, you say, wait a minute, I'm pretty good at this. I need to make an investment on this skill so I can get better, which is all well and good. But I remember a joke from the late, great Paul Mooney off his album Race. One of the best jokes he ever wrote. He talked about there's a movie out, and it starred Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson called White Man Can't Jump. And the joke, he says, did you hear about this movie? He goes, White Man Can't Jump. He said, they don't have to. They own the team. And in that space, sometimes, brothers and sisters, we love sports so much and we want it to represent so much about us that we lose sight of things. The guys behind me that I'm showing you right now, like Big Josh Gibson, they are a reminder, if you will, a bedrock in terms of the aspects of how sports really, really, really affect America. You guys heard, and some of you have heard me talk about Negro Leagues, not talk about the players, not talk about people who really move the sport along. Miss Effa Manley owning a team and all of that, and the Pittsburgh Grays and all of that. And I think it really boils down to the fact that we have become a society, we love sports. One of the great stories that's going to come out of the NBA is about this young guy, Giannis Antetokounmpo, if you will. Giannis Antetokounmpo, who comes from Greece as an 18-year-old player to the Milwaukee Bucks, and he winds up being an NBA champion. Not just an NBA champion, but a two-time MVP, one-time Defensive Player of the Year. He comes here, he stays, he grows with the city. It's a love story, brothers and sisters. It's an absolute love story that he stayed there and he was able, if you will, to I think we have to get JT on there. I'm sorry. JT's having some problems getting on the show. But my point is, this love affair of sports is interesting because it's just been around for I don't know how long it's been around. I don't know how long sports has actually been around. sports like golf and things like that have long traditions, brothers and sisters. And it is rooted in competition. We love competition. And at some point in time, when it's not professional competition or elite athletes performing the competition, it reminds us at some point in time that we could be just a little bit better than someone else. The idea of keeping score, the idea of wins and losses are really in sports the nomenclature for how successful you are. It's a nomenclature for how effective you are competing with other people, how you manage your team. And a lot of times, it has been the salve that we've put in for a lot of things. A lot of Olympics have been affected by boycotts. We talk about the Olympics. I think in 1980, we had the boycotts. Our teams didn't go. Our athletes didn't go, and it was caught in the politics. And I think it's important to say that a lot of sports has been wrapped around politics. We just had the soccer final. England lost. I think Italy won. England lost. But we had a soccer final, and you talk about when you break down all these different leagues that are about competing, but it's also not just competing, but feeding into this natural born and sometimes structured, I want to say tribalism, if you will. We choose sides, if you will. We choose who our champions not are going to be, but who we want them to be. The interesting thing about Milwaukee is while Milwaukee has a lot of wonderful people, and you saw scenes of people in what's called the Deer District, over 65,000 people, 65,000 people outside of the arena, along with the people that are inside of the arena. They could do all of that stuff, but at the same time, Milwaukee has one of the worst public school systems in the country. It's a very segregated city. If you were to go to Milwaukee and you were downtown where, of course, the arena is, but were you to go north and take a camera and go north, it's you take the 60 bus, you take the 17 bus, you take the 23 bus, you would see a different part of Milwaukee that's not touched by, of course, sports. It's not touched by competition. These people live a base life of survival. Now, let me also put this in here. Let me add this. It's also the aspect that, we live through our athletes. Let's just say that. We live through our athletes. If I was old enough to appreciate a Jackie Robinson, I would have. If I was old enough to appreciate a Josh Gibson, I would have. I was old enough to appreciate an Arthur Ashe. Old enough to appreciate a Michael Jordan, a Dr. J, a Magic Johnson, who showed us more than just athleticism. They showed us business and things like that. Even LeBron James, to an extent. I haven't seen Space Jam. I'm going to watch it because I'm going to support LeBron James in terms of his entertainment endeavor. I heard it was terrible, but they said the same thing about Space Jam back in the day. It was terrible. So suit yourself. It's on HBO Max. I will be watching. But what of this profundity, if you will, that we had tied into the actions, the movements, the decision making of other people through sports? One of the big things, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, JT, welcome to the show. Congratulations to you and your Milwaukee Bucks. I think JT was, boy, you were a baby when the Bucks first and last won. So, but congratulations. But Johnny Lee Thomas was a county supervisor, someone who worked in a political system in Milwaukee. And I was just saying, JT, as much as we celebrate the Milwaukee Bucks winning, Milwaukee is a city, man, that has traditionally had a lot of issues with race, employment, education. Mom said only a few blacks. Yeah. Only a few blacks do own teams, if you think about it. And I'm saying this because I really want to lay argument out. Why are we so in love with sports? We can divert all of our attention to sports for something that's going to have us entertained for 2.5 to 3 hours. And then we leave that space and go right back to the realities that we were running from. And we don't see anything wrong with that. Altaf said, I'd love to get your thoughts on overtime elite and whether same sort of thing will grow for other sports. OTE, can you explain OTE? Because I think I know what you're talking about. I'll talk, but I don't want to misquote myself. One of the big things now is NIL, name, image, and likeness for college students and high school students, but most of college students who are able now to capitalize on their name and their brand. Now, I've been a big proponent of it. I've agreed with it a lot. Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. Thank you, Altaf. I thought that was what you were talking about. I read about it, about one of the guys that's putting in some stuff in there. That's it. Thank you, Samir. That's right. I am wearing, brothers and sisters, this jersey is not a Yankee jersey. This is the New York Black Yankees. Check your team. Check your team. New York Black Yankees. But let's go to something that Alto just talked about. A new developmental basketball league whereby kids are coming out of school, out of high school, finishing high school. Some of them may not finish high school, going directly into a developmental league to start immediately working on their basketball skills. Hear what I'm saying? You are expanding the choice now for children, young men, young women, mostly young men right now, to focus and specialize on what they want to do. Move education out of the way. Let me just focus and let this be my education and grow my proficiency in this sport in the hopes that I'll be able to get a pro career. Is it controversial? For some, yes. And I say it's controversial for some because it leaves them out of the profit making. These young men and women are making decisions on their own, and they're taking, for lack of a better word, they're taking the bull by the horns in terms of their own personal development and business strategy. Because we're talking about business strategy. Samir says not everyone wants to go to college, and the NBA needs to come to terms with it. Well, they had that before. Spencer Haywood was the case, and Spencer Haywood and Moses Malone were the cases for guys going directly from high school to the pros. Moses Malone was supposed to play at the University of Maryland, and Spencer Haywood, I can't remember where he was supposed to play, but they both challenged that rule. And this is early on. They challenged this rule, brothers and sisters. So when you see the LeBron James and the Kobe Bryants and the Kevin Garnett's and the Jermaine O'Neals and all of these people, for lack of a better word, it was the Spencer Haywood that actually made it real. And the fundamental question is, if you can benefit off of me playing sports for your team, why can't I be at the front end of the funnel and decision making for me being able to make a decision as to where I want to take my talents? I'm a big proponent of player movement now because players now have a lot to do with where they want to play, forcing their way to teams they want to be involved with. And I think the thing that's come out of it is like for the Josh Gibsons that never got to play in Major League Baseball. He was basically he was the best player. He was better than Jackie Robinson. Ask anybody. Ask Jackie Robinson if he was still here. But it was the premise, and I would say this with a certain reservation. I don't want to be too bullish. But these were the people and decisions that allow for players now to literally choose and express the issues they want to confront in terms of social justice, whether it's police brutality, whether it's voting, whether it's education, whether it's criminal reform. Sports has given them a platform. That is the transition. At one point, it was to play and to be seen as equal. Now, and anybody that plays sports, going back to the 70s, going back to the 60s, it wasn't enough if you were black or Latino and you won. They had terms like you got to win the right way. And I always say to win the right way is basically say to win the white way. Following the rules, following the protocols that don't benefit you, that have nothing to do with you really, really. Mr. Buck Leonard, they have the Negro League Baseball Museum in Milwaukee, and one of the last living guys, I think he passed now, Mr. Buck Leonard, lived in Milwaukee. If you get a chance to go to Milwaukee, go to the museum. If you're in Kansas City, they have the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City. Right, Samir? Give me a shout out. But what they have demonstrated, brothers and sisters, is before you had the apparatus of the vote, before you had civil rights, these guys use sports two ways. Number one, to point out inequality, and number two, to promote Black excellence, or to promote at least, I said Black excellence, but also to promote, for lack of a better word, the fact that we can build a model that's independent of you, and we can be just as good as you for our own folks. So we got a few there. Babyface the right way. Okay. All right, brother. You got jokes today. Thank you, brother. Thank you. All right, Samir, you on a roll today. So now Sophie Blacks recruited because owners build and maintain training recruiting teams south of the border. Recruits mostly not available back. Well, yeah, the idea of players that come from poor Latin countries, that's always been a reality. Yeah, it's always been a reality, but it shows me the resilience of those players, not so much the systems that they come out of. Because the systems, for lack of a better word, are exploitive systems. They have kids playing baseball. In the United States, we see the Little League World Series, and you see these kids coming up, and it's really emphasized to these kids that this is the way you can be successful. Come to the United States to play baseball. Come to the United States to play baseball. The other sport, of course, is soccer. But it was interesting because these kids are farmed out. The difference with, let's say, basketball and baseball is that basketball has a certain amount of currency, if you will. You see, with basketball, you have coaches, you have handlers, you have parents, you have boosters. Baseball is not the same way. And because of that, and availability of, I want to say, outlets and options, baseball has monopolized talent, as Samir says in Dominican Republic. It monopolized the talent pool. Like, you make that the only thing that's really, really available, then that's what people are going to excel in. That becomes the language in terms of how do you adjust up? How are you successful in sports? One of the good things I was able to do, and a lot of us were, I was able to play sports at a young age, where playing a sport was not just win or lose, it's how you won and how you lost. Things like sportsmanship, things like teamwork were really, really important. Being able to be a part of a group, whether you started or whether you came off the bench, whether you played the whole game or whether you played none. The humility of dressing up to play in a game and you never touched the field or you never touched the court. And it had a lot to do with building character. That was the most important thing about amateur sports. And the joy of watching this particular NBA championship was that I watched a guy who made his decisions based on character. Of course, this is Giannis Antetokounmpo. I always say his name wrong. Let's just say Giannis. But it was interesting when he accepted his first trophy for Player of the Year, and he cried. And he cried because his father wasn't there. And he cried because he knew he remembered how hard his mother worked. This is a guy who was 18 years old when he made it to the NBA, brothers and sisters. He was not a sure shot. He was a skinny kid. He wasn't playing. He actually went to the owners at one point in time and said, put me in the G League. because he wanted to develop his game as opposed to sit on the bench. I mean, this is a work ethic. And one of the things he said, aside from winning, the guy remembers the DNA of what it takes to get there. And when he was asked, is this an example to other Nigerian children? He said, no, it's just an example to anybody who's been told you can't do it. Anybody has been told you're not good enough. And what he talked about how his mother sacrificed. Remember, we talked about sacrifice in a recent show. He talked about how his mother sacrificed. And she sacrificed in the only way a mother could. She sacrificed not knowing whether this thing was ever going to pan out or not. The only assurances she had was that she did the best for her child, that he was happy, whether it was win or loss, success or failure. She made sure that he had that opportunity. My parents allowed me to play sports, and I'm sure your parents allowed you to play sports, but sometimes we don't understand why they had us play sports and get a full appreciation. Watch Giannis and his interviews. But then I want you to go back and I want you to watch some of the old interviews. I want you to watch the interview of Muhammad Ali after he declared to be, after he beat Sonny Liston. And look at the athletes that were around them, the Bobby Mitchells, the Jim Browns, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbars, the people like that, the Bill Russells, and understand the scope of these guys. They were giants way before we could even think about them as being such. They were giants operating in the space going, we have a platform and we're going to take our platform and not hold up Muhammad Ali, but we're going to protect him. Think about this. We're not going to hold him up. We're going to protect him. And they weren't all Muslim or anything like that. What they were, brothers and sisters, was concerned about their brother and how he was being treated in the media, how he was being treated in society. Because remember, people didn't like Muhammad Ali right off the bat. And when he became, of course, Muhammad Ali, they really didn't like him. But when you think about it, and I always remember a young Kareem Abdul-Jabbar sitting with Muhammad Ali, we talk about the power of sports. That picture is iconic. It's extremely iconic when you start thinking about the mastery of sports sitting in that one picture. Each and every one of those guys did something that was a landmark. From Muhammad Ali to Bill Russell to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to Jim Brown to Bobby, they did something that was a landmark, brothers and sisters. And they, in their space, think about this, were fighting for social justice. The power of sports has the ability to do that. The power of business in sports has the ability to undo that, to somehow have us move out. So, brother, I'm going to close here. I have to get going. You guys have been amazing. Let's give a shout out for our sponsors. I want to give a shout out to BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. You can call 1-800-886-496-8645. Again, that's 1-888-496-6845. Give them a call, or just go to the website. That's what I suggest. And we also want to give a shout out to Bayan Islamic Graduate School. Go to bayanonline.org. Again, that's bayanonline.org. Holler at your brothers and sisters. And this is a good show today. I appreciate you. Pardon me for being a little bit tired of it on the flight, but I'm happy to bring this show to you because it means a lot. So I'm going to give a shout out also to all the sports pioneers, the brothers and sisters that got recognition, brothers and sisters that didn't get recognition, that laid the way for us, not only in sports, but also in social justice. You guys have been great. I got to bounce. Take care of yourself. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shout out show.
Hey, everybody, this is your brother, Preacher Moss. Listen, I hope that you enjoyed your Shout Out Show experience. We'll be back with the next show, the next Shout Out Show. A simple ask before you go, please help your brother out. Click that subscribe button, click that notify button, and I'll see you again on this side of the microphone.